Budget condenser mics seem to be in the forefront of a lot of people's minds these days, whether that's because they have a bit more time on their hands than usual for reasons unknown, or because they're just looking to save a bit of money and start on the home recording game. Either way, let's have a look at one of the more popular ones, the Studio Project's B1. Hello there everyone, my name is Jake and I'm the Chief Engineer and Producer here at Sawmill Recordings, and again we're going to be talking about the Studio Project's B1. It retails for $119 US, and this Chinese manufactured FET condenser is only a tiny bit more expensive than the SM57. And for that price it really isn't too bad of a microphone. Like, I was surprised when I first got it. For a Chinese-made microphone, it's a pretty high-quality circuit, and it's got a pretty flat frequency response. It has a 5 dB boost starting at 3K, peaking at 12K, and then just sort of petering out like all the rest of the mics do. Translated from non-nerdy English, it's a pretty bright microphone, and its honesty in the low and mid-range rivals that of the U87. As you can see on the mic itself, there's a 2-level pad at 10 dB and 20 dB, and a high-pass filter at 75Hz and 100Hz. It's well packaged and comes with a shock mount that didn't make me want to blow my brains out. That is, until the elastics went on me a couple of years later. I then found that hair elastic, if you've stretched it out a bit, will work just fine in these slots, and I haven't had another problem with it since. So let's see how this thing sounds on a number of different sources. So here we are in front of the microphone. It's giving us this rather nice round sort of tone. There's a tiny bit of room reflection, but I'm not entirely sure that will translate very well. Anyway, there's a bit of proximity effect going on because I'm only about 2 inches from the microphone, and proximity effect basically means the closer you get to a microphone, the more the bass increases. So now let's make it a bit interesting. Now you've heard sort of how this microphone sounds totally flat, no filters, no pads engaged. Let's change the preamp and see if we can get a cooler sound. You've heard how it sounds with the normal stock Focusrite Claret 4 pre. Let's engage the air function and read some stories. In a hole in the ground there lived a hobbit. Not a nasty, dirty, wet hole filled with the ends of worms and an oozy smell, nor yet a dry, bare, sandy hole with nothing in it to sit down on or to eat. This was a hobbit hole, and that means comfort. It had a perfectly round door like a porthole, painted green, with a shiny yellow brass knob in the exact middle. The door opened onto a tube-shaped hall, like a tunnel, a very comfortable tunnel without smoke, with panelled walls and floors tiled and carpeted, provided with polished chairs, and lots of pegs for hats and coats. The hobbit was very fond of visitors. So that was definitely interesting to see. I personally think it's one of those microphones that you really have to work with in order to get the sound that you want, but the advantage to it is it's simple work. You don't have to get all surgical or do anything like that. Just broad EQ moves will get it sounding exactly how you need it to. I noticed this especially in the voice, in the sort of narration when it was about intro to Away From My Face. It sounded kind of spitty at first, but then I used an EQ and I brought up some of the low end, and it really did wonders for it. The other big surprise for me was the acoustic guitar. It almost sounded a bit mix ready. It didn't intrude too much in the low end. I would have liked to have seen more low end out of it, and in the process I think I did boost it a bit, but for the low end that we got, it was pretty good, and you get that sort of high-end zing that you like out of an acoustic guitar that will actually be heard in a mix that won't just kind of be high-passed. And as an added bonus, it's not too fussy with placement. You can sort of put it vaguely in the spot where you want. You don't have to move it by millimeters, but then again, that's a hallmark of many condenser microphones in the first place. This one in particular seems not to really mind, just, use the requisite amount of knowledge that you have to place it, and it will probably sound pretty decent. The main drawback I would give with this mic isn't so much the need to work with it a bit, but it's more its lack of versatility. Studio Projects also makes a mic called the B3, which has variable polar patterns as well as a pad. It skips the sort of high pass thing altogether. This essentially gets you 3 mics for the price of 1. The price tag also kind of reflects this. It's still not as much as you would like. It's still not as much as you would pay for it normally, but it's still pretty much at, I believe, $240 US, but it's around that area. So 3 mics for the price of 1. How does that work? Well, when you get a variable polar pattern microphone, you essentially change how the mic sees its sound, how it picks up the sound, and also how honestly it translates that sound to you, the listener. With the variable polar pattern, you not only have the advantage of being able to record lots of people in the same room with strategic placement, but you also get that slight change in frequency response from what it was designed to do versus the other frequency patterns. Let me explain. Multi-pattern microphones work by having 2 or more capsules in the same microphone. The most common orientation is one behind the other, sort of like this. But, you can get other ones with 4 capsules or more, all in like a sort of square. But the most common and cheapest option is one behind the other. By controlling the polarity and the level of voltage between the 2 capsules, you can get any basic pickup pattern that you would want. Omni, cardioid, and figure 8. But you also have spaces in between for like subcardioid or hypercardioid. And depending on how precise that power supply in the case of a tube mic, or switch in the case of a non-tube mic or just a condenser microphone is, the more weird ones you can get in between, which can serve purposes if you are looking for that kind of very specific microphone pattern. Say you want to have a bunch of people recording in the same room, but you've got a vocalist and you don't want the guitar sound, which is going through an amp, or even sometimes a drum sound, to bleed into that microphone too much. Well, if you set up 90 degrees to that drummer. Whereas, so the vocalist is over here, the drums are behind me. This microphone, because it's in figure 8, will cancel out all of the stuff coming at its 90-degree poles. Why is this? Well, it's a null point. It goes around and around, stopping here. Now, that doesn't mean that reflections from this wall can't come into the microphone, but you can baffle that and still have something pretty well isolated. Ribbon microphones have this sound by default, and this quirk was used to great effect by engineers in the 50s and 60s, where they all had the band in one room and they just moved people around in the room. They sort of have the vocalist close to the mic, the backup vocalist on the other side of the mic, the drums all the way out there, the bass a bit closer and maybe a bit on a 45. So how does this variable polar pattern feature affect frequency response? How is it 3 different sounding mics in one package? Well, the physical size and dimensions of a diaphragm in a microphone will always result in some high frequency loss when sound comes in off axis. Doesn't matter if it's condenser, dynamic, or ribbon. That's just how it's going to be. So we get to this situation where if you have an omnidirectional microphone, yes, it picks up sound from all directions, but it won't always accurately translate that sound coming from all directions. Why is this? Because the capsules are two-dimensional. They're flat, and fun fact, the larger the capsule is, the more pronounced this effect is. What ends up happening is sounds being picked up at a 45-degree angle are going to reach one side of the capsule before the other side. This creates phase cancellation and high frequency loss. So how can we use this effect practically? Well, say you were recording a bluegrass band, and you just have one microphone. You set that microphone to omnidirectional and you have everyone gather around it, but you might choose to move the fiddle player and the banjo player out to the 45-degree position because those instruments are particularly harsh, and you might get some high end just sort of smoothed out in general, which wouldn't be as harsh when you came time to try and mix that single mic recording. Another quirk of omnidirectional mics is that they actually have a bit better bass response than a lot of other microphones. It's roughly about an octave, which isn't too much, but it's still quite a bit. And of course, that effect is going to be more pronounced the more on-axis you go. More on-axis, more bass. More off-axis, less bass, more high frequency loss. So in the case of the folk band, you can move the soloist to the front of the microphone and then move them back away when their time to solo is finished. This means you get the biggest fidelity of sound, and you can even have the bass player stand quite close to the on-axis position, but a bit farther away from the microphone, so that you can just sort of balance the sound in the room. But what this means is that with different polar patterns come different high-frequency pickup patterns. And this effect is enough to warrant a change in a frequency response graph. You can look at this at other multi-pattern microphones like the U87 and all that stuff. Nerd time over. So bringing this whole tangent on microphone theory back around, the B1 doesn't have this. This is its one major drawback. It's not a very versatile mic. It's just cardioid, but if you're looking for a mic that's just cardioid, this is a pretty good start if you aren't looking to spend a whole lot of money. Yeah, you have to work with it a bit, and if you're looking to learn to mix as well, this will be a great start. I hope this informs your decision as to whether or not this will be a good purchase for your studio, your podcast, or any other need you might have for a budget condenser microphone. And that's it. Please like, comment, and subscribe. You can go check out my blog in the link in the description below on my website, www.sawmillrecordings.com. And please tell me what you would like to hear me do next. The next couple of videos I'm thinking are going to be reviews, but I'm going to get onto the drum pre-production and all the drum recording series that I intend to make very soon. It's just very slow in coming, and I want to be very, very thorough so that you guys can have all the information you could want in one place. Now let's get you making music.